The archaeological dig on Dracarys Prime had been going on for 6 months when they found the crystal. Dr. Elena Vasquez brushed the last bits of ancient soil from its surface, revealing intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The crystal was the size of a human fist, perfectly smooth and warm to the touch despite being buried for what the dating equipment suggested was over 10,000 years. "This doesn't match anything in our databases," muttered Professor Chun, the expedition's lead xenobiologist. He adjusted his scanning equipment for the third time, but the readings remained the same. "The energy signature is unlike anything we've cataloged from this sector." The research station buzzed with activity as scientists from 12 different species worked to understand their discovery. Dracarys Prime had been abandoned for millennia. Its original inhabitants vanished without explanation. The planet's surface was covered in massive structures that defied easy classification. Too organic to be buildings, too geometric to be natural formations. Local legends spoke of great winged beasts that once ruled the skies, but the Galactic Council dismissed such stories as primitive mythology. Young Marcus Chun, the professor's 12-year-old son, watched the adults work with barely contained excitement. He had begged his father to let him come on this expedition, promising to stay out of trouble and help with simple tasks. Most of the research team treated him kindly, but kept him at arm's length from their serious scientific work. Only Dr. Vasquez seemed to genuinely enjoy explaining her discoveries to him. "The patterns on this crystal," she said, crouching down to Marcus's eye level. "They're not random decorations. There's some kind of writing, but not like any language we've seen before. See how these lines flow together? It's almost like they're meant to be sung rather than read." Marcus nodded eagerly, his dark eyes reflecting the crystal's soft glow. "It feels sad," he said quietly. Dr. Vasquez paused. "Sad? What do you mean?" "I don't know. When I look at it, I feel like something important is missing. Like when my grandmother died, and the house felt empty even though all her things were still there." The comparison struck Dr. Vasquez as oddly perceptive for a child. She had felt something similar when first touching the crystal, though she had attributed it to the excitement of discovery mixed with the melancholy of exploring a dead civilization. As evening approached, the research team gathered in the main lab to discuss their findings. The crystal sat in the center of the table, its glow seeming brighter in the dimmed lights. Professor Chun presented their preliminary analysis to the group, which included representatives from the Zephyrian Science Collective, the Mantari Archaeological Guild, and several human universities. "The mineral composition is completely unknown," Professor Chen explained, gesturing to the holographic displays surrounding the crystal. "It contains elements that shouldn't be stable in this configuration, yet here it is, apparently maintaining its structure for thousands of years. The energy readings suggest it's not just storing power, it's actively generating it." Commander Thale of the Zephyrian fleet leaned forward, his elongated fingers drumming against the table. The Zephyrians were the galaxy's foremost experts on ancient technologies, having built their civilization on the ruins of a dozen predecessor species. "Has anyone attempted to activate it? We've tried standard energy inputs, harmonic frequencies, even telepathic contact," replied Dr. Kestra, the team's Mantari specialist. Her insectoid features shifted in what might have been frustration. "The crystal responds to our presence. The glow increases when we're near, but we can't seem to access whatever information it might contain." Marcus, who had been quietly listening from a corner of the lab, suddenly spoke up. "What if it's not waiting for the right frequency? What if it's waiting for the right feeling?" The adults turned to look at him, some with amusement, others with barely concealed annoyance. Commander Thale's translator rendered his response with mechanical precision. "Child, archaeological artifacts are not activated by emotions. They require precise scientific methodology." But Dr. Vasquez was studying Marcus's face with growing interest. "What kind of feeling do you think it wants?" Marcus walked closer to the crystal, ignoring the disapproving looks from some of the scientists. "It feels lonely, like it's been waiting for someone to understand what it's trying to say. When I was little and had nightmares my mom would sing to me. Maybe it needs someone to sing to it. Professor Chin started to object, but Dr. Vasquez held up a hand. Let him try, she said. We've exhausted our conventional approaches. What harm could it do? Marcus approached the crystal slowly, as if it were a frightened animal. He could feel its warmth growing stronger as he drew near. The patterns seemed to shift and flow, becoming more intricate the longer he stared at them. Without really thinking about it, he began to hum, a wordless melody that seemed to emerge from somewhere deep in his chest. The effect was immediate and startling. The crystal's glow intensified dramatically, and the patterns on its surface began to move, swirling and dancing like living things. The humming seemed to resonate through the crystal, creating harmonics that filled the lab with ethereal music. Then Marcus opened his mouth and began to sing. The words came from nowhere in a language he had never heard but somehow understood. His young voice carried across the lab, pure and clear, filled with longing and hope and a deep, aching sadness for something lost. As he sang, the crystal rose from the table, floating in midair as energy cascaded from its surface. The lab filled with holographic images, vast cities of impossible beauty, towering spires that reached toward the clouds, and, soaring through it all, creatures of legend and wonder. Dragons. They were nothing like the primitive depictions found in human mythology. These beings were elegant and powerful, their scales shimmering with colors that had no names. Some were small and delicate, no larger than birds, while others dwarfed the largest spacecraft. They moved through the air with impossible grace, their wings creating patterns of light and shadow across the ancient cities below. But as Marcus continued to sing, the images changed. The dragons began to fade, their forms becoming translucent. The great cities emptied. The skies grew dark and lifeless. The final image showed a lone dragon, ancient and magnificent, breathing its last breath as it curled around what appeared to be the very crystal now floating before them. When the song ended, Marcus collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The crystal settled gently back onto the table, its glow dimmed but still present. The lab was silent except for the boys' quiet sobbing. Dr. Vasquez knelt beside Marcus, her own eyes wet with tears she couldn't explain. "What did you see?" she asked gently. "They're gone," Marcus whispered. "They've been gone for so long, and they're never coming back. The crystal, it's their heart, their soul. It's been waiting and waiting, but there's no one left to hear it." Commander Thale's usual composure had cracked. Even his translator seemed to struggle with the emotion in his voice. The dragons of Dracarys Prime were not mythology. They were real. They were magnificent. Professor Chin stared at his son in amazement. "How did you know how to sing that song?" Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I didn't know it. It just came to me, like the crystal was teaching me while I sang." He looked up at the assembled scientists, his young face serious beyond his years. They didn't just die out. Something terrible happened to them, something that made them sacrifice themselves to save their world. Dr. Kestra's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among her species. The energy readings during the boys' performance were off our scales. Whatever information was stored in that crystal, it's been fully activated now. Over the following days, teams of linguists and cultural anthropologists worked to decipher the full meaning of the crystal's revelations. The dragon civilization had been far more advanced than anyone had imagined. They had achieved a form of technology that blended science with what could only be called magic, the ability to manipulate reality through will and song. But their greatest achievement had also been their downfall. The dragons had discovered a threat approaching from beyond the galaxy, a consuming darkness that devoured not just matter and energy but consciousness itself. Faced with this ultimate enemy, the dragons of Dracarys Prime had made an impossible choice. They had gathered their entire species' life force into crystalline repositories and hidden them across their world. Then, they had used their combined power to create a barrier around their solar system, a barrier that would hold the darkness at bay, but at the cost of their own existence. The crystal Marcus had awakened was just one of hundreds scattered across Dracarys Prime. Each one contained not just memories, but actual fragments of dragon consciousness. The species had not truly died. They had transformed themselves into pure thought and emotion, waiting for someone with the right sensitivity to hear their call. As the research team prepared their preliminary reports for the Galactic Council, Marcus spent hours sitting with the crystal. He had developed an almost telepathic connection with it, able to sense emotions and images without need for song. Through this bond, he learned that the threat the dragons had died to contain was not gone, merely delayed. The darkness was patient. It had been probing the barriers around Dracarys Prime for millennia, slowly weakening the dragon's sacrifice. Soon, perhaps within a generation, it would break through. When Marcus shared this information with the adult researchers, their reactions ranged from skepticism to outright panic. How could a 12-year-old boy possibly understand cosmic threats that had destroyed an advanced civilization? But Dr. Vasquez believed him. She had seen the power in his voice, felt the genuine emotion in the crystal's response. If Marcus was right, then humanity and all the other species of the galaxy were facing an enemy beyond their comprehension. The question was, what could they possibly do about it? As if sensing her thoughts, Marcus looked up from where he sat cross-legged beside the crystal. His eyes held a wisdom that seemed impossible for someone his age. "The dragons aren't really gone," he said quietly. "They're just sleeping, and I think they've been waiting for someone like me. Someone who can hear their songs and learn their ways. Someone who can help them wake up." Dr. Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine. "Marcus, what are you saying?" The boy's hand moved to rest on the crystal's smooth surface. "I'm saying that maybe the dragons didn't just save the galaxy once. Maybe they saved it so that someday, when the darkness comes back, there would be someone here who could learn from them. Someone who could help them return." As if responding to his words, the crystal pulsed brighter, and for just a moment, Dr. Vasquez could have sworn she heard the distant sound of wings beating against the evening sky. The excavation of Dracarys Prime was about to become much more than an archaeological expedition. It was about to become humanity's first lesson in preparing for a war that had been waiting 10,000 years to resume. And at the center of it all was a 12-year-old boy whose voice had awakened legends, and who might be the key to ensuring those legends could one day soar again. 3 weeks after Marcus first awakened the crystal, the research station on Dracarys Prime had transformed into the largest xenoarchaeological operation in galactic history. Ships from dozens of worlds crowded the orbital space above the planet, their crews eager to study what the media had dubbed the Dragon Discovery. But for Marcus, the excitement of the outside world felt distant and unreal compared to the growing connection he felt with the crystals. They had found 47 more since that first night, each one hidden in locations that seemed to follow a pattern only Marcus could understand. He would wake in the morning with absolute certainty about where to dig, leading teams of confused but amazed scientists to crystal after crystal. Each discovery brought new revelations about dragon society, their technology, and the threat they had died to contain. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the expedition's new child psychologist, watched Marcus with growing concern. The Galactic Council had insisted on her assignment after reports of a human child displaying unprecedented xenopathic abilities. She found Marcus sitting in his usual spot in the central lab, surrounded by 7 active crystals, their combined glow casting rainbow patterns across his face. "How are you feeling today, Marcus?" Dr. Mitchell asked, settling into a chair beside him. Marcus didn't look away from the crystals, but his voice was thoughtful when he answered. "Different, like I'm becoming someone else, but also more myself at the same time. Does that make sense?" It didn't, but Dr. Mitchell had learned not to dismiss anything Marcus said. "Can you tell me about the voices you mentioned yesterday?" "They're not really voices," Marcus said, finally, turning to look at her. "It's more like memories that aren't mine. Sometimes I'll remember flying over the crystal forests of Ethermore, even though I've never left this solar system. Or I'll know how to repair a quantum resonance engine, even though I barely understand regular math. Dr. Mitchell made notes on her tablet, trying to maintain professional objectivity despite the impossibility of what Marcus described. Are these memories troubling you? Do they feel invasive? Marcus considered this seriously. No, they feel like gifts. The dragons want me to understand them, to learn from them. They're teaching me because... He paused, his young face suddenly troubled. Because the darkness is coming back sooner than anyone realizes. Before Dr. Mitchell could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the research station. Commander Thale's voice echoed over the intercom system. All personnel to emergency stations. We're detecting massive energy fluctuations from the planet's core. Marcus shot to his feet, his eyes wide with sudden terror. It's starting, he whispered. The next few hours would be remembered as the moment everything changed. Deep beneath Dracarys Prime's surface, ancient machinery that had lain dormant for millennia began to reactivate. The energy signatures were unlike anything in galactic databases, patterns of power that seemed to bend the laws of physics. In the orbital command center of the research fleet, Admiral Corvus of the Zephyrian Deep Space Command studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. His long-lived species had survived 3 galactic wars and 2 extinction-level cosmic events, but he had never seen anything like this. The energy buildup is exponential, reported Lieutenant Sarn, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. If this continues, the planet's crust will destabilize within 6 hours. Begin immediate evacuation of all surface personnel, Admiral Corvus ordered. And give me a direct link to the Galactic Council. They need to know what's happening here. But down in the research station, Marcus was refusing to leave. You don't understand, he pleaded with Professor Chun, who was trying to pack their essential equipment. The crystals aren't just warning about the darkness. They're trying to prepare for it. The energy buildup isn't random. It's the planet's defense system coming online. Dr. Vasquez supported Marcus's interpretation. The readings match theoretical models for continental-scale terraforming systems. Whatever's happening, it's controlled and deliberate. Professor Chun struggled with the decision. Every parental instinct told him to get Marcus off the planet immediately, but the boy's connection to the crystals had proven too valuable to ignore. If we stay, we're risking your life on a theory. If we leave, Marcus replied with startling maturity, we might be abandoning the galaxy's only hope of survival. The compromise was a heavily shielded emergency shelter built around the crystal chamber, with evacuation ships standing by if conditions deteriorated further. As the planet's transformation accelerated, Marcus placed his hands on the largest crystal and opened his mind to the vast network of dragon consciousness. What he saw there took his breath away. The dragons had not simply hidden their life force in crystals. They had created a planetary-scale resurrection system, powered by the planet's own core. The crystals were nodes in a vast network designed to reconstitute their species from pure energy back into physical form. But the process required a living mind to guide it, someone who could bridge the gap between dragon consciousness and physical reality. The ancient dragons had assumed that one of their own kind would eventually awaken to complete the process. They had never imagined that their rescuer would be a human child from a species that had not yet evolved when they made their sacrifice. As Marcus delved deeper into the dragon memories, he began to understand the full scope of what was required. The resurrection process would not simply restore the dragons as they had been. It would require a fundamental merging of consciousness, dragon wisdom, and power channeled through human determination and adaptability. I have to do something, Marcus told the assembled scientists, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the crystal network. The dragons can't come back on their own. They need someone to help them remember what it means to be alive. Dr. Vasquez grasped his arm gently. Marcus, what exactly are you planning to do? I have to sing them back into existence. But not just their bodies, their hearts, their hope, their will to fight. The darkness didn't just kill them. It convinced them they had already lost, that hiding was their only option. I have to help them remember why they chose to live. The process began at sunset on Dracarys Prime, a time the dragons had considered sacred for its symbolism of endings becoming beginnings. Marcus stood in the center of the crystal chamber, 47 crystalline hearts of an extinct species arranged around him in patterns that followed mathematical principles humanity was only beginning to understand. As he began to sing, the crystals responded with harmonies that had not been heard for 10 millennia. But this time, Marcus's voice carried more than just dragon melodies. He wove inhuman songs of hope and perseverance, melodies from Earth's history of overcoming impossible odds. He sang lullabies his mother had taught him, work songs from human colonies that had thrived in hostile environments, and battle hymns from species that had refused to surrender in the face of annihilation. The energy building in the planet's core found new focus and direction. Ancient machinery designed to restore dragon bodies began incorporating new patterns, adapting to Marcus's unique fusion of human and dragon consciousness. The resurrection system, dormant for millennia, sparked to life with unprecedented vigor. Above them, the research teams watched in awe as massive crystal formations began growing from the planet's surface. These were not the simple storage crystals they had been finding, but complex structures that pulsed with increasing intensity. Dr. Kestra's instruments detected the formation of matter from pure energy, atoms arranging themselves according to patterns stored in the Dragon Consciousness Network. Impossible, breathed Commander Thale, watching the sensor readings. They're creating living tissue from coherent energy fields. The power requirements alone should have torn the planet apart. But Marcus, his young voice somehow carrying across the entire planet's surface, was doing more than just providing power. He was teaching the awakening dragons how to exist in a galaxy that had changed beyond recognition in their absence. Through his song, he shared humanity's discoveries, the galaxy's current political situation, and, most importantly, hope for a future where different species could work together against common threats. The first dragon materialized in a flash of brilliant light just after midnight. It was smaller than the ancient giants shown in the crystal memories, roughly the size of a horse, with scales that shifted between deep blue and silver. Its eyes opened with an intelligence that was both utterly alien and strangely familiar. Marcus's song faltered for a moment as he met that ancient gaze, but the dragon's mental voice reached him with gentle reassurance. "Young singer," it said, its thoughts carrying the weight of countless centuries, "you have done what we thought impossible. You have bridged the gap between what was and what could be." More dragons began to appear, each one unique in size and coloration, but all bearing the mark of Marcus's influence, a quality that combined dragon majesty with human determination. They were not exactly the same species that had died 10,000 years ago. They were something new, dragon bodies and ancient wisdom guided by human adaptability and hope. As dawn broke over Dracarys Prime, 17 dragons perched on the crystal formations surrounding the research station. They were the first of their kind to draw breath in 10 millennia, and their eyes were fixed on a human boy who had sung them back into existence. But Marcus, exhausted by the night's effort, had collapsed unconscious among the now dormant crystals. When Dr. Vasquez checked his vital signs, she discovered something that would puzzle medical science for decades to come. His neural patterns had been permanently altered by his connection to the Dragon Network. He was still human, but he was also something more, a living bridge between two species that should have been separated by impossible gulfs of time and biology. The dragons watched over him as he slept, their ancient minds already beginning to process the information he had shared about the approaching darkness. They had been given a second chance at life, but they knew it came with enormous responsibility. The threat that had destroyed them once was still approaching, and this time they would need more than dragon power to face it. They would need the stubborn, innovative, endlessly hopeful spirit of humanity, the same spirit that had somehow reached across 10,000 years of separation to bring them home. As Marcus began to stir, the largest of the resurrected dragons spoke for all its kind. "Young human, you have given us life. Now we must learn how to use it in service of something greater than ourselves. Will you teach us what it means to hope again?" Marcus opened his eyes to find 17 pairs of ancient, wise, and utterly determined dragon eyes looking down at him. Despite his exhaustion, he smiled. "I'll teach you," he said simply, "and you can teach me how to fly." 6 months had passed since the dragon's resurrection, and the galaxy was struggling to process the implications. The Galactic Council had held 17 emergency sessions, each one more heated than the last. The return of species thought to be mythical had shattered centuries of scientific understanding, while the dragon's warnings about an approaching cosmic threat had sparked panic and preparation in equal measure. On Dracarys Prime, now renamed Haven by mutual agreement between humans and dragons, Marcus had grown in ways that went far beyond his 14 years. The neural connection formed during the resurrection ritual had deepened, allowing him to communicate with the dragons on levels that transcended language. He could feel their emotions, share their memories of the ancient world, and, most remarkably, he could access their instinctive understanding of forces that human science was only beginning to comprehend. Ethes, the blue-silver dragon who had been first to resurrect, had become Marcus's closest companion and teacher. Unlike the massive dragons of legend, the resurrected dragons were more compact, their forms adapted to work alongside the smaller species that now populated the galaxy. Ethes stood roughly 8 feet at the shoulder, with wings that could fold tight against her body when moving through human-sized spaces. "Your species learns quickly," Ethes observed, her mental voice carrying notes of amusement as they watched a joint training exercise between human marines and dragons. "But they still think too linearly about the coming conflict." Marcus nodded, understanding her concern. "They're trying to fight it like a war they've fought before. Ships, weapons, tactics. But this enemy isn't like anything they've faced. The Void, as the dragons called the approaching darkness, was not a conventional military force. It was a self-aware entropy, a conscious hunger that consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence. The dragon's ancient records spoke of entire civilizations that had simply ceased to be when the void passed through their space, leaving behind regions where the laws of physics themselves became uncertain. Commander Sarah Hayes, the newly appointed liaison between the Galactic Defense Force and the Dragon Council, approached their position with a group of senior military officers. Her expression was grim as she reviewed data on her tactical display. "We've lost contact with 3 more scout fleets in the Outer Rim," she reported. "The pattern is consistent with what your histories describe. First communication gets distorted, then ships start reporting instrument failures, then nothing. Not destroyed, just gone like they never existed." Ethes spread her wings slightly, a gesture that Marcus had learned indicated deep thought among dragons. "The void does not destroy in ways your sensors can detect. It unravels the quantum foundations that allow matter to maintain coherent form. Your ships do not explode. They simply stop being real." Admiral Corvus, his Zephyrian features pale with strain, stepped forward. "Our conventional weapons are useless against such a force. Energy beams require matter to interact with. Projectiles need targets that exist in measurable space. How do we fight something that negates the basic principles of reality?" It was Marcus who answered, his young voice carrying authority that still surprised the adults around him. "We don't fight it the way you're thinking. The dragons learned that brute force only feeds the void's hunger. The more energy you throw at it, the stronger it becomes." Dr. Vasquez, now serving as the expedition's chief xenobiologist, looked up from her analysis of dragon bioenergy patterns. "Then, how do we stop it?" "We remind the universe why it chose to exist in the first place," Marcus said, the words coming from dragon memories that felt as real as his own experiences. "The void wins when everything becomes meaningless, when hope dies, and creation stops. We fight it by being more real than it is, by creating meaning and purpose and connections so strong that they can't be unraveled. The concept was difficult for the assembled military officers to grasp, but Professor Chun, now serving as humanity's chief cultural ambassador to the dragons, began to nod slowly. You're talking about weaponizing consciousness itself, using the fundamental force that drives all sentient life to resist entropy. More than that, added Skyrender, a crimson dragon whose expertise lay in ancient dragon war arts. We must create a resonance cascade of interconnected consciousness, all thinking beings linked in shared purpose, their combined will to exist serving as armor against the void's hunger. Commander Hayes frowned at the tactical implications. How do you coordinate something like that across hundreds of worlds and dozens of species? The logistics alone would be nightmare. Ethes turned her ancient eyes toward Marcus. Show them, young singer. Let them understand what we have discovered together. Marcus took a deep breath and opened his mind to the Dragon Link fully. Instantly, every human and alien in the immediate area felt a sudden expansion of awareness. They could sense each other's thoughts, not invasively, but like distant music heard through walls. Fear and wonder mixed in the connection, but underlying it all was something else, a profound sense of belonging to something larger than themselves. This is what the dragons call the harmony, Marcus explained, his voice somehow carrying to each person's mind as clearly as their ears. It's not telepathy exactly. It's shared purpose made manifest. When beings link like this, they become more than the sum of their individual consciousness. They become a force that can create reality instead of just responding to it. Dr. Kestra, her Mantari sensory organs vibrating with the unfamiliar sensation, clicked her mandibles in what might have been amazement. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. You're somehow creating localized increases in quantum coherence, making the space around us more fundamentally real. The demonstration ended after a few minutes, leaving the participants with lingering sense of connection and possibility. But it had served its purpose. For the first time since the Void's approach had been detected, the assembled leaders began to believe that resistance might be possible. Over the following weeks, Haven became the center of the most ambitious undertaking in galactic history. Representatives from every known species arrived to study the dragon-human harmony and learn techniques for expanding consciousness beyond individual boundaries. The work was painstaking and often dangerous. Forcing unnatural connections between alien minds sometimes resulted in severe psychological damage. But gradually progress was made. The Zephyrians, with their natural telepathic abilities, proved most adept at maintaining stable links across multiple consciousness types. The Mantari, despite their alien neural structure, contributed crucial insights into how group minds could maintain individual identity while sharing purpose. Even the notoriously independent humans began developing techniques for temporary mental fusion. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, his unique bridge consciousness serving as translator and coordinator between species that had never successfully communicated on such deep levels. The dragon memories flowing through his mind provided context and technique, while his human adaptability helped other species find their own paths to the harmony. But the process was changing him in ways that concerned those who cared about him. Dr. Mitchell, now part of a team studying the psychological effects of dragon-human fusion, watched Marcus with growing alarm. He's losing aspects of his humanity, she reported to Professor Chun during one of their private consultations. His emotional responses are becoming more aligned with dragon psychology. He's starting to think in terms of centuries rather than years, to see individual lives as less significant than cosmic patterns. Professor Chin studied his son through the observation window, watching as Marcus moved among a group of mixed species, helping them maintain mental links that allowed unprecedented cooperation. But look at what he's accomplishing. Without him, none of these species could work together effectively. I'm not questioning his importance. Dr. Mitchell replied carefully. I'm questioning whether the boy we knew still exists inside that fusion of consciousness. The dragon's memories and perspectives are overwhelming his human development. He's becoming something else entirely. Their concerns proved prophetic 2 weeks later, when long-range sensors detected the void's approach to the outer rim of known space. The darkness was moving faster than predicted, consuming entire star systems and leaving behind regions where space itself became uncertain. Marcus's response to the news was far more calm than anyone expected. Standing before the assembled galactic leadership, he spoke with authority that belonged to neither his years nor his species. The time for preparation is ending, he announced. The void has accelerated its approach because it senses the harmony we've been building. It knows that if we succeed in linking all conscious life in this galaxy, we'll become too real for it to consume. Admiral Corvus leaned forward in his chair. What are you proposing? Total commitment, Marcus replied, his eyes reflecting depths that seemed far older than 14 years. Every world, every ship, every thinking being linked in permanent harmony. We abandon individual existence and become a single, galaxy-spanning consciousness dedicated to preserving reality itself. The silence that followed was profound. Commander Hayes was the first to speak, her voice carefully controlled. Marcus, what you're describing would mean the end of individuality, the end of personal choice. Every person would become part of a collective mind. Yes, Marcus answered simply. It's the only way to generate enough coherent consciousness to stop the void. Individual minds are too weak, too scattered. We need unity of purpose beyond anything that's ever been attempted. Ethes, who had been silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. The young singer understands what many do not. This is not a conflict between armies. It is a battle between existence and non-existence. Half measures will result in complete failure. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her face filled with concern. Marcus, you're talking about sacrificing everything that makes the galaxy's species unique. Their cultures, their individual dreams, their personal relationships. Is survival worth that price? For a moment, something flickered in Marcus's eyes, a shadow of the 12-year-old boy who had first awakened the crystals. But it passed quickly, replaced by the ancient wisdom of dragon memory. The void offers no dreams at all, he said quietly. In non-existence, there are no cultures to preserve, no relationships to cherish. We can choose transformation, or we can choose complete annihilation. There is no middle path. As the debate continued around him, Marcus gazed out at the stars visible through the station's observation deck. Somewhere out there, darkness was consuming entire civilizations. Soon, it would reach the core worlds, and then even Haven itself. The boy who had sung dragons back to life was gone, replaced by something that thought in cosmic terms and measured time in geological epochs. Whether this transformation represented salvation or tragedy, only the coming battle with the void would reveal. The void arrived at the edge of human space exactly 47 days after Marcus's proposal for total consciousness merger. The darkness came not as an invasion fleet or a natural disaster, but as something far more terrifying, a spreading zone where the fundamental laws of reality began to break down. Captain Maria Santos of the exploration vessel Horizon was among the first to witness the void's approach firsthand. Her ship had been monitoring the outer beacon stations when the anomaly appeared on their sensors. What they saw defied every principle of physics her crew understood. Captain, reported Lieutenant Kim, his voice tight with confusion, the Proxima station just stopped existing. Not destroyed, not moved, just completely absent from all our detection systems. But the gravitational effects are still there, as if something with the station's mass is present, but invisible to every form of measurement we have. Captain Santos studied the impossible readings while her science officer, Commander Tvex of the Vulcanoid Science Corps, worked frantically at his instruments. Analysis, Commander? Tvex's typically calm demeanor showed cracks of genuine terror. The quantum signatures in that region are collapsing into chaos. Matter is losing coherence at the subatomic level. Captain, I believe we are witnessing the active unraveling of reality itself. The retreat order came too late. As the horizon tried to flee, the expanding zone of non-existence caught them in its periphery. Systems began failing not because of damage, but because the principles that allowed them to function were ceasing to apply. The ship's hull began to lose molecular cohesion while its energy systems found themselves operating in a space where conservation laws had become suggestions rather than absolutes. Captain Santos managed to transmit a final message before the Horizon joined Proxima Station in the realm of things that had never been. All ships, all stations. It's not what we expected. It's not destruction. It's unmarking. It's as if the universe is forgetting we ever existed. Tell them the boy was right. Only unity can fight this. On Haven, the Galactic Defense Council received Santos's transmission with grim resignation. The debate over Marcus's proposal had raged for weeks, with species after species struggling with the concept of abandoning individual existence for collective survival. Now, faced with the reality of the Void's inexorable advance, the time for debate was ending. Marcus stood before the assembled representatives, his form somehow seeming both younger and infinitely older than his 15 years. The dragon-human fusion had progressed to the point where his appearance shifted subtly, depending on the observer. Humans saw a boy carrying impossible wisdom, while dragons perceived an ancient consciousness wearing mortal flesh. The Void consumes 3 more systems each day, he reported, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through both audible and telepathic spectrums. Our conventional fleets cannot even approach it. Ships equipped with the experimental reality anchors last approximately 4 minutes longer than unprotected vessels. We have perhaps 2 weeks before it reaches the core worlds. Admiral Corvus, now serving as Supreme Commander of the United Galactic Forces, rose from his seat. His long-lived Zephyrian perspective had made him more accepting of radical solutions than many of his colleagues. The Council has reached a preliminary decision regarding your proposal, Marcus, but we need clarification on several points. Ask, Marcus replied simply. If we agree to this consciousness merger, will individual personalities survive in any recognizable form? Will the beings we are today continue to exist, or will we essentially die to birth some new collective entity? Ethes, perched beside Marcus, answered before he could speak. You will not die, Admiral. You will become more than you currently are. Your individual consciousness will serve as a single note in a symphony of awareness that spans the galaxy. Your thoughts, your memories, your essential self will remain, but they will be part of something immeasurably greater. Commander Hayes leaned forward, her expression skeptical. And what about free will? Personal choice? The right to make individual decisions? This time Marcus answered, his words carrying the weight of dragon memories spanning millennia. Individual choice is a luxury that exists only when the universe itself is not under threat. The Void does not negotiate. It does not compromise. It simply unmakes everything it encounters. We can choose to preserve consciousness in a new form, or we can choose to let all consciousness cease forever. Dr. Vasquez, who had watched Marcus's transformation with growing concern, stood to address both him and the Council. I've studied the neurological patterns of the dragon-human fusion extensively. What Marcus is proposing isn't just consciousness merger. It's the creation of a galaxy-spanning superorganism. We would become something that has never existed before. Something that can fight an enemy that exists outside normal reality, Marcus replied. The dragons learned during their first encounter with the Void that individual consciousness, no matter how powerful, cannot generate enough coherent reality to resist the unmarking. Only unified awareness can maintain existence in the face of absolute negation. The debate might have continued for hours, but it was interrupted by emergency alerts from every monitoring station on the rim. The Void had suddenly accelerated, its expansion rate increasing exponentially. Systems that should have lasted days were being consumed in hours. Professor Chun, monitoring the situation from the science stations, looked up with naked fear. At this rate, the void will reach Haven in less than 72 hours. If we're going to attempt consciousness merger, we need to begin immediately. The vote was swift and decisive. Faced with imminent extinction, even the most individualistic species chose transformation over annihilation. Within hours, ships from across the galaxy began arriving at Haven, bringing the most powerful telepaths, consciousness researchers, and spiritual leaders their worlds could offer. The process began at dawn on the third day. Marcus, serving as the focal point for the merger, stood in a vast amphitheater carved from the living crystal that now covered much of Haven's surface. Around him, in concentric circles that stretched for miles, representatives of every known sentient species prepared to abandon individual existence for collective survival. The dragons were first, their ancient consciousness sliding into harmony with Marcus's human-adapted awareness like missing pieces of a vast puzzle. Their memories of the first void encounter provided the template for resistance, while their understanding of reality manipulation offered the tools necessary for survival. Next came the humans, their chaotic creativity and stubborn refusal to accept defeat, adding vital unpredictability to the emerging collective. Each human mind that joined brought unique perspectives and experiences, creating a richness of thought that the dragons had never achieved alone. The Zephyrians followed, their naturally telepathic abilities serving as bridges between wildly different consciousness types. Their gift for long-term planning and strategic thinking provided structure to the growing mental symphony. One by one, species after species joined the merger. The Mantari brought their hive mind experience and instinctive understanding of collective decision-making. The crystalline Shalori contributed their ability to maintain multiple simultaneous thought processes. Even the gaseous ethereals, barely recognizable as life by most standards, added their unique perspectives on existence and consciousness. As each new mind joined the collective, Marcus felt his individual identity both dissolving and expanding. He was no longer just a human boy touched by dragon consciousness. He was becoming the focal point for the largest unified awareness the galaxy had ever known. Through billions of eyes, he could see the void approaching Haven's solar system, its darkness consuming the outer planets, and leaving behind regions where the very concept of place became meaningless. But the collective was ready. As the void reached Haven itself, it encountered something unprecedented in its eons of existence. A consciousness so vast, so unified in its purpose, and so fundamentally real that it could not be unraveled. The battle was unlike any conflict ever fought. There were no weapons fired, no ships destroyed, no tactical maneuvers executed. Instead, reality itself became a battlefield as two incompatible concepts of existence clashed at the deepest possible level. The void sought to unmake, to reduce all complex organization to primordial chaos. But the collective consciousness centered on Haven asserted the opposite, that complexity, awareness, and meaning were fundamental properties of existence that could not be negated. Through Marcus's expanded awareness, the collective felt the void's confusion as it encountered resistance it had never faced before. For the first time in its eternal existence, the hunger that consumed entire universes found something it could not digest. The fight lasted subjective centuries, though external observers would later calculate it at exactly 73 minutes. Within the expanded consciousness, Marcus and billions of other individuals maintained their essential selves while contributing to a unified, that literally rewrote the laws of physics in their local region of space. Gradually, impossibly, the void began to retreat. Not destroyed, that was beyond even the collective's power, but convinced that this particular galaxy contained something too real, too fundamentally alive, to be safely consumed. The darkness withdrew to seek easier prey among universes where consciousness remained fragmented and individual. When the immediate threat passed, The collective faced its greatest challenge yet, deciding whether to maintain unity or return to individual existence. The power of unified consciousness was intoxicating, offering perspectives and capabilities no single mind could achieve. But it also meant the permanent end of personal privacy, individual choice, and the messy, chaotic diversity that had defined galactic civilization. It was Marcus, still serving as the collective's focal point, who proposed the solution. His consciousness, permanently altered by the dragon-human fusion, could serve as a bridge between unified and individual awareness. The collective could maintain itself for times of crisis while allowing constituent minds to return to individual existence for normal life. The transition back to individuality was gradual and careful. Each consciousness was gently separated from the collective while maintaining permanent connection pathways that could be reactivated when needed. The dragons, with their ancient understanding of such techniques, served as guides for the process. When Marcus finally opened his individual eyes, the first time in months he had experienced singular consciousness, he found himself surrounded by beings who had shared the deepest possible intimacy, but were now learning to be separate again. Dr. Vasquez was among the first to approach him, her face showing the strain of readjusting to individual thought. "How do you feel?" she asked. Marcus considered the question carefully, acutely aware that he was no longer entirely human, entirely dragon, or entirely the collective consciousness he had briefly become. "Different," he said finally, "but still me, just more connected to everything else." Ethes landed nearby, her draconic features showing similar signs of adjustment strain. "The young singer has become something new," she observed. "Neither fully human nor dragon, neither individual nor collective. A bridge between all states of consciousness." Professor Chen approached his son with tears in his eyes. "I was afraid we'd lost you entirely to the merger." Marcus smiled, and for the first time in months, it was purely the expression of a human teenager. "I'm still your son, Dad, but I'm also something more now. We all are. The void is still out there, and there are other threats we haven't imagined yet. But now we know we can face them together when we need to." Looking up at the stars that had been saved from unmarking, Marcus felt the quiet presence of billions of minds that could be reunited in an instant if necessity demanded. The galaxy had learned to choose unity without sacrificing diversity, to be both individual and collective as circumstances required. The boy who had sung dragons back to life had become something unprecedented, a living symbol of conscious evolution, a bridge between what was and what could be. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, other civilizations facing their own encounters with impossible darkness might hear echoes of that first awakening song, reminding them that even the greatest threats could be overcome by voices joined in perfect harmony. The dragons had returned, consciousness had evolved, and the galaxy had discovered that the greatest weapon against oblivion was not technology or tactics, but the simple, stubborn refusal to stop existing. Marcus, standing between human determination and dragon wisdom, between individual choice and collective purpose, had become the living embodiment of that refusal. And in the depths of space, where new threats were always gathering, the echo of his song continued to spread, a promise that consciousness, creativity, and hope could triumph over even the darkest hungers of an uncaring universe.